What if the whispers were true? What if the stories that everyone dismissed as cruel inventions from the tabloids carried a grain of truth? For years, Meghan Markle's name has been entangled with rumor, controversy, and speculation. But none has been as persistent or as haunting as the whispers of a hidden child. A child that no one was supposed to talk about. A child that, until recently, was nothing more than a dark cloud drifting across Meghan's carefully curated narrative. And now, for the first time, her mother, Doria Ragland, has stepped forward, not to deny, not to silence, but to hint, to suggest, to leave the world questioning everything it thought it knew. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this. The woman who has remained the single most silent and steady figure throughout Meghan's rise to fame. The one who avoided interviews, who avoided headlines, who kept her lips sealed even when everyone around her cashed in on their proximity, suddenly breaking her silence. Why now? Why in this moment? And what exactly does her statement mean? Those questions are not just whispers anymore. They're echoing across newsrooms, social media platforms, and dinner table conversations. Because if Doria is even hinting that the rumors aren't entirely false, then the ground beneath Meghan Markle's empire begins to crack. This story matters now because timing is everything. The royals are still reeling from recent crises. Meghan and Harry are trying to rebuild their public image after years of backlash, lawsuits, and failed ventures. Every move is scrutinized, every word dissected. And in that fragile moment, when reputations are balancing on a razor's edge, Doria Ragland's voice cuts through the noise. It isn't just another gossip columnist throwing accusations. It isn't another anonymous source hiding behind friends close to the couple. This is Meghan's mother, her blood, her confidant, the woman who has been at her side through everything. And her words, even the slightest suggestion, carry a weight that the tabloids could never manufacture. But before we rush ahead, let's take a step back. Because to understand the magnitude of what Doria said, we need to revisit the story itself. The whispers of the hidden child didn't emerge overnight. They grew slowly, like ivy crawling up the walls of a palace. Small mentions here, suspicious gaps there, rumors that seemed too wild to believe but too persistent to ignore. Meghan Markle, the actress turned duchess, presented a polished story of her life. Childhood in Los Angeles, ambition that drove her to Hollywood, humanitarian passion, and finally, a fairy tale romance with a prince. But every fairy tale has its shadows. And in Meghan's timeline, there were shadows that no amount of PR polish could erase. Consider this. The years between Meghan's early 20s and her breakout on Suits remain strangely underexplored. Tabloids, always eager to fill in the blanks, began weaving narratives about pregnancies, relationships, and disappearances. None of it could be proven, of course. But rumors, once planted, rarely disappear. They linger. They fester. They resurface at the most inconvenient moments. And Meghan's rise to royal life brought those old whispers back to life, amplified under the global spotlight. Still, throughout all of this, one person never spoke. Doria Ragland. She stood in the background during Meghan's wedding, regal in her dignity, silent in her loyalty. When Meghan and Harry faced a media storm, Doria didn't give interviews. She didn't publish memoirs. She didn't leak stories. She played the role of the unshakable mother, which is why her recent words are so shocking. Because if Doria is cracking, if she is even allowing herself to acknowledge that the whispers aren't entirely false, then the story shifts from baseless gossip to chilling possibility. And let's ask the real question, what does Doria know? Think about it. If anyone has the answers, it's her. She was there during Meghan's formative years. She knows what happened, who Meghan loved, and what Meghan endured. She knows the silences that others speculate about. She knows the truth, or at least enough of it to either confirm or crush the rumors, which makes her decision to hint instead of deny absolutely fascinating. Why wouldn't she shut the story down completely? Why leave the door open? Was it intentional? A slip? A message to Meghan? Or perhaps the message to the world? The power of a rumor lies not in whether it's true or false, but in whether people believe it could be true. And right now, Doria has shifted the balance. Millions who once dismissed the idea are suddenly wondering, And those who always suspected something have found fuel for their theories. Meghan's enemies are circling, her supporters are scrambling, and the press is salivating. A single mother's suggestion has set the stage for a storm. But here's what most people aren't realizing. This moment is bigger than just Meghan Markle. This isn't only about whether there was or wasn't a hidden child. It's about image. It's about trust. It's about the carefully constructed walls celebrities and royals build around themselves. Because if Meghan's story has cracks, if the foundation isn't what it seemed, then everything on top of it begins to wobble. And when the walls collapse, they don't just fall on Meghan. They fall on Harry, on Doria, on the Sussex brand, and maybe even on the monarchy itself. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, why would Doria choose this moment to speak? Was she pushed? Was she protecting herself? Or has she simply grown tired of carrying a secret? Some speculate that the strain of watching Meghan's battles with the royals, the media, and even Harry has pushed Doria to her limit. Others whisper that perhaps Doria herself was threatened, reminded that silence comes at a cost. And still others suggest something more sinister, that Doria's words weren't a mistake at all, that they were part of a strategy, a deliberate act, a warning shot, a way of taking control of the narrative before someone else exposed it. Whichever theory you lean toward, the result is the same. We are standing at the edge of a story that could redefine Meghan Markle's legacy forever. Think of it like the first crack in a dam. Tiny, almost invisible. But once the water begins to seep through, it's only a matter of time before the entire structure bursts. And if that dam breaks, the flood won't just wash away Meghan's reputation. It could drown everyone connected to her. And this, dear listener, is where the story truly begins. Because the rumors of Meghan's hidden child aren't just about scandal. They're about power. They're about what people choose to believe. They're about how silence can sometimes be more damning than denial. And when silence finally breaks, it echoes louder than any scream. So here's the promise. Over the next chapters, we are going to dig into this story like never before. We'll explore where the rumors began, why they persisted, what evidence surfaced, and why Doria's recent statement changes everything. We'll peel back layers of image and illusion, looking for the truth hidden underneath. And we'll do it piece by piece, chapter by chapter, like detectives following a trail of breadcrumbs that Meghan herself tried to sweep away. But let me leave you with this thought. In fairy tales, secrets always come back. A hidden child, a concealed truth, a past that refuses to stay buried. It always resurfaces. And when it does, it tests not just the character of the person at the center, but the loyalty of everyone around them. Meghan Markle has fought against the tabloids, the royals, and the public. But what happens when the battle isn't against outsiders, but against the ghost of her own past? That is the question that Doria Ragland's words have forced us all to confront. And what came next would change everything. Because Doria's whisper wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. What if the first spark wasn't just gossip? What if it was something far closer to home? Something so ordinary, so small, that almost everyone missed it. Every story has an origin point, and in Meghan Markle's case, the rumors of a hidden child didn't appear out of thin air. They began in whispers, faint at first, floating around coffee shops, whispered at casting calls, murmured in the echo chambers of Hollywood gossip. A sentence here, a side glance there, and before long, what started as fragments of chatter began to weave itself into a narrative too compelling to ignore. Think about it. Why do rumors of this scale survive? Why don't they simply vanish the way most idle speculation does? You've heard wild celebrity stories before. Aliens, clones, scandalous affairs, and most disappear the moment the next headline rolls in. But this one lingered. Why? Because it carried the kind of tension that the public can't look away from. A mother, a daughter, a secret life. The elements of tragedy and betrayal were baked in from the start. The earliest sparks go back to Meghan's years before Suits. She wasn't yet a household name, but she was chasing acting jobs, grinding through auditions, and navigating the relentless uncertainty of Hollywood. The people who passed through her life then, roommates, fellow actors, casual friends, remember her with affection, yes, but also with puzzlement. There were gaps, disappearances, weeks where Meghan seemed to vanish from the social circuit, only to reappear polished and composed as if nothing had happened. Some brushed it off. Others wondered, and a few claimed they knew the reason. And here's where the whispers began to crystallize. Around 2004 and 2005, just as Meghan was starting to find her footing, rumors emerged that she had stepped away, briefly, from the world of auditions. At first, it was explained as exhaustion, a mental health break, or a personal issue. But in the small circles of casting directors and struggling actors, the story that floated around was very different. They said Meghan hadn't just stepped away. She had disappeared for a reason. What reason? That's where the story splits into competing threads. Some said she was caring for a sick relative. Others hinted at a failed relationship that left her shattered. But the darkest thread, the one that clung most stubbornly, was the whisper of a pregnancy. Now ask yourself this. Why would such a rumor stick? Hollywood is full of people who vanish for months, even years, and no one bats an eye. But Meghan wasn't just anyone. She was charismatic, magnetic, and ambitious. People noticed her. People remembered her. And when she returned, sharper, hungrier, more determined than before, the contrast was too striking to ignore. The whispers grew. Of course, Meghan herself never addressed these rumors. Publicly, her story was seamless: school, early acting gigs, determination, and the eventual breakthrough. Clean, controlled. But those who claimed to know her personally told different stories. One roommate recalled a time when Meghan was strangely protective about certain conversations. Another claimed Meghan avoided questions about family and relationships, redirecting or shutting down any line of inquiry that got too close to her personal life. And this is where we ask, was it coincidence? Or was Meghan deliberately burying something? It's important to remember the cultural context here. In Hollywood, rumors of secret children aren't unusual. Countless stars, from old studio-era actresses to modern pop idols, have faced speculation about children born in secret, raised away from the spotlight, or quietly erased from their official biographies. The industry thrives on mystery, and the audience thrives on peeling back the curtain. So when Meghan Markle began to rise, when she stepped into the royal spotlight, the old whispers were suddenly reborn. But this time, they carried new weight. Because now Meghan wasn't just an actress. She was marrying into the British monarchy. She was stepping into a role where bloodlines mattered, where image was scrutinized, where every misstep became global news. And in that context, the idea of a hidden child wasn't just salacious gossip. It was a potential scandal of seismic proportions. Think about it. A hidden child means secrets. Secrets mean leverage. And leverage, in the world of royalty, is everything. Could a tabloid dig up evidence? Could a rival leak information? Could the monarchy itself be blindsided? These weren't just questions for gossip columns. They were questions for palace aides, for public relations teams, for Meghan and Harry themselves. But let's rewind again. Where exactly did the whispers first gain traction? Some point to a 2006 blind item posted on a gossip blog, an anonymous submission describing a television actress with a past she's desperate to hide. The details were vague, but readers quickly connected dots, speculating that the actress in question was Meghan. The item faded, as most do, but it planted a seed. Years later, that seed would sprout. Others claim the whispers originated even earlier, among Meghan's peers at Northwestern University. Friends from her time, there allegedly recalled unusual silences, stories that didn't quite add up, and sudden shifts in her behavior. One former acquaintance reportedly said, "It always felt like there was a chapter of her story missing." Do you feel it? That tension building? The sense that something doesn't quite line up? That's the heartbeat of every rumor. The place where fact and speculation blur into one tantalizing narrative. And Meghan Markle's life, polished though it may appear, has those gaps, those shadows, those unanswered questions. Now, let's bring Doria Ragland into the frame. While Meghan's peers whispered, while tabloids speculated, while fans debated, Doria remained silent. Absolutely silent. She didn't give clarifications. She didn't scold the media. She didn't even flinch. And for years, her silence was interpreted as loyalty. But in retrospect, some wonder, was it loyalty? Or was it strategy? Because silence cuts both ways. To deny is to engage. To speak is to open the door to further scrutiny. But silence leaves space. It leaves room for speculation. It leaves room for people to believe, even if only a little, that the rumors have substance. And when Doria finally broke that silence, even slightly, even with just a suggestion, it didn't land as an offhand remark. It landed like an earthquake. Why? Because silence creates pressure. And when pressure finally breaks, it doesn't just release, it explodes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dissect Doria's statement, we need to understand how whispers evolve into storms. In Meghan's case, it was the timing. Every major moment in her public life reignited the hidden child rumor. Her engagement to Harry? The whispers surged. Her wedding? The whispers roared. The birth of Archie? They screamed louder than ever, with some insisting the timelines didn't make sense, that Meghan was hiding more than she revealed. And each time, Meghan's team fought back. Lawsuits, letters, public denials. Yet, curiously, never from Doria. Not once. The mother who could have crushed the story with a single firm denial chose instead to remain a shadow. So ask yourself, what does that mean? Was she protecting Meghan? Protecting herself? Or protecting someone else entirely? Rumors survive because people want them to survive. They scratch an itch, feed a curiosity, play on our fascination with hidden lives. But they also survive when silence gives them oxygen. And in Meghan's story, silence has always been a defining character. But here's the twist. The whispers that began in the small, tight-knit world of Hollywood weren't confined there. They spread. They crossed oceans. They infiltrated the British press. And once the British tabloids got hold of the narrative, the game changed completely. The monarchy may be centuries old, but nothing rattles it more than a scandal involving lineage. Bloodlines are their currency, and a hidden child? That's not just gossip. That's dynamite. So, as we close this chapter, consider this. The whispers that started in private conversations, in blind items, in murmurs around campus and casting calls, have now grown into a roar that even Meghan's mother could no longer ignore. And if the whispers were enough to shake a monarchy, what happens when the first piece of evidence surfaces? Because that moment, when rumor collides with something tangible, is where everything begins to spiral. And no one, not Meghan, not Doria, not even the royal family, could have predicted what was coming next. Where do you start when someone's life story doesn't quite add up? With Meghan Markle, the tale has always been presented as glossy, straightforward, and inspiring. Born in Los Angeles, raised with ambition, educated, determined, polished, and eventually rewarded with a starring role on Suits before marrying into the British royal family. That's the official narrative. But when you look closer, when you slow down, rewind, and analyze, there are moments that feel blurred, hazy, incomplete. And it is in those blurred lines that the whispers of the hidden child gain traction. Here's the question: what exactly do we know about Meghan's past? Not from palace PR statements, not from curated interviews, but from the raw, messy, contradictory threads of her actual timeline. Let's walk through it carefully, because it is in these gaps that the story turns from rumor into something that people can't stop questioning. Start with the basics. Meghan was born in 1981 in Los Angeles to Doria Ragland and Thomas Markle. Her early years were split between her mother's modest home and her father's world of television production. Nothing unusual there. But even in her childhood, there were already hints of duality. A girl raised in two households. A girl with two versions of herself. The quiet, disciplined Meghan that teachers praised, and the ambitious, outspoken Meghan who wanted more from life than the ordinary. Through her teens, Meghan seemed like any other bright student with big dreams. She attended Immaculate Heart High School, where classmates remembered her as articulate, polished, and a little guarded. She excelled in writing, theater, and activism. But several classmates later reflected on how Meghan rarely talked about her personal relationships. While others gossiped about crushes, boyfriends, or parties, Meghan kept her life tightly controlled. It wasn't silence, it was strategy. Even as a teenager, she seemed to understand the power of mystery. Now here's where the gaps begin. After high school, Meghan attended Northwestern University. On paper, it's a smooth transition, a double major in theater and international relations, graduation in 2003, and a move toward acting. But friends from her Northwestern years tell a more complicated story. Meghan, they said, was ambitious but elusive. She would dive into projects with intensity, then disappear for stretches. Some attributed it to stress. Others thought she was pursuing acting opportunities. But the pattern, of appearing and disappearing would repeat throughout her 20s. And in those absences, the whispers were born. By the mid-2000s, Meghan was hustling for roles. She appeared in commercials, bit parts in shows like General Hospital, and eventually landed gigs as a briefcase model on Deal or No Deal. Yet, behind the scenes, colleagues noticed something strange. Meghan's determination was obvious, but she was oddly private. While others vented about auditions, heartbreaks, and family troubles, Meghan kept her cards close to her chest. She projected an image of confidence, but those who tried to get closer often hit a wall. Was this simply her personality, or was she hiding something? Around 2004 to 2005, several acquaintances claimed Meghan pulled away from the acting circuit for a short but noticeable period. Not long enough to derail her career, but long enough for people to notice she was gone. When she returned, she offered no clear explanation. She simply reappeared, poised and determined, ready to push harder than ever. Some said she had been traveling. Others whispered something different, that she had been away dealing with something personal, something she couldn't reveal. And here's where the contradictions get sharper. Officially, Meghan's timeline flows smoothly from graduation to small acting jobs to her eventual breakthrough on Suits. But unofficially, people close to her suggest there were moments she deliberately erased, periods of distance from friends, stories that shifted depending on who asked, small inconsistencies that, taken alone, seem meaningless, but when strung together, look suspiciously like a puzzle with missing pieces. What kind of missing pieces? Consider relationships. Meghan has been linked to a handful of men prior to Prince Harry, including her first husband, Trevor Engelson. Yet even here, the narratives are carefully polished. Details about earlier romances are scarce, vague, and often inconsistent. People who knew her during her 20s describe her as guarded, rarely bringing partners into her social circle, rarely allowing personal details to slip. And while that could be chalked up to ambition, it also fits neatly into the theory that Meghan was determined to keep parts of her past sealed away. Now think about the timeline again. Meghan married Trevor Engelson in 2011. By that point, she was in her 30s. For years before, she had been building her career. But those middle years, roughly between 2003 and 2010, remained strangely thin on detail. She was working, yes. She was visible, yes. But in terms of personal narrative, silence. And that silence is where the rumors of a hidden child found oxygen. Let's pause here. Have you noticed how every great scandal clings to a timeline gap? Marilyn Monroe's missing days, Princess Diana's unexplained calls, even modern celebrity scandals. Always, the suspicion grows strongest when someone disappears from view. And Meghan's story has that very same gap. The whispers say that during one of those absences, Meghan faced a pregnancy. Some versions of the story claim she gave birth in secret. Others claim she arranged for the child to be raised privately, away from the public eye. None of these claims are verified. None have hard evidence. But the persistence of the rumor is telling. Because rumors without oxygen die. And yet this one has survived for nearly 2 decades. Why? Because the people who should have denied it never fully did. Meghan never addressed it directly. Doria never shut it down. And silence, as we've already said, speaks volumes. Now, let's add one more layer. Meghan's ambition was not ordinary. From an early age, she envisioned herself not just as an actress, but as someone destined for influence. That kind of ambition requires discipline, control, and ruthless editing of one's own story. Could it be that Meghan erased an inconvenient chapter? Could it be that the very image she presented to the world, polished, perfect, and unstoppable, was carefully constructed to hide the one truth that could unravel it all? If so, the silence makes sense. If so, Doria's loyalty wasn't just maternal, it was strategic. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Fast forward to Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry. As the romance heated up, the British tabloids dug ferociously into Meghan's past. They looked for scandals, secrets, skeletons, and they found the whispers of the hidden child. Yet, even as the palace scrambled to manage the narrative, even as Meghan's legal team threatened lawsuits, the rumor remained stubbornly alive. Why? Because, once again, the timeline gaps were never convincingly explained. Ask yourself this. If Meghan had nothing to hide, why didn't she simply open the books? Why not lay out her history in detail, timeline intact, and crush the rumor forever? The answer, some argue, is that she couldn't. That the truth was messier than the image allowed. That the story she presented wasn't just edited, it was rewritten. And here lies the contradiction that fascinates the world. Meghan Markle has built her brand on authenticity, on speaking her truth, on presenting herself as a woman who broke barriers with honesty. Yet the gaps in her past suggest a different story. One where silence reigns, where mystery dominates, where the truth remains locked away. So here we are, staring at a timeline that doesn't add up. A childhood filled with ambition, a university career marked by mystery, a Hollywood hustle punctuated by vanishing acts, and a royal romance shadowed by whispers that refuse to die. The past is never really past. It lingers, it shapes, it waits. And Meghan's past, the one she tried to keep buried, is now clawing its way to the surface, thanks to the one person who knows it best, her mother. Because when Doria Ragland finally spoke, she didn't just hint. She confirmed what many feared, that the gaps in Meghan's story weren't accidental. They weren't coincidence. They were deliberate. And if they were deliberate, then the question becomes unavoidable. What, exactly, was Meghan Markle hiding? And the next chapter begins with the one person who carried that burden the longest, Doria herself. Because her silence wasn't just loyalty. It was survival. What does it mean when silence speaks louder than words? For years, Doria Ragland stood as the calm, unshakable figure behind Meghan Markle. She was always there, quietly, gracefully, without drama, yet never fully stepping into the spotlight. And that silence, so carefully maintained, became as much a part of Meghan's story as Meghan herself. But here's the problem. Silence is a double-edged sword. It can protect, but it can also accuse. It can shield, but it can also imply. And now, with her recent words, Doria's silence is being reinterpreted not as blind loyalty, but as heavy burden. Let's start at the beginning. Doria, unlike Thomas Markle, never sought attention. When Meghan's father spoke to the tabloids, sold photos, and gave interviews, Doria stayed hidden. When Meghan married Harry, Doria walked into Windsor Castle with poise, but without a single word to the press. She didn't cash in on her daughter's fame. She didn't write a book. She didn't sell her story. To the world, that restraint looked like dignity. But to others, it looked like something else entirely. Why keep so quiet for so long? Was it loyalty, fear, or the weight of a secret? Think of the moments when Doria could have spoken but didn't. After Meghan's engagement, when the press was ravenous for family stories. After the wedding, when Thomas Markle was splashing his grievances across headlines. After Harry and Meghan's retreat from the royal family, when everyone was begging for inside voices to explain what really happened. Each of those moments was a chance for Doria to step forward, to defend her daughter, to clarify. Yet each time, she chose silence. That silence wasn't passive. It was active. It was a decision. And decisions carry meaning. Consider the psychology of silence. When someone close to you is accused of something untrue, what is your instinct? You rush to defend them. You shout from the rooftops. You swear to anyone who will listen, it's a lie. Don't believe it. But Doria didn't do that. She didn't push back against the whispers of a hidden child. She didn't say, "This is nonsense." She didn't laugh it off. Instead, she left the door cracked open. And in that tiny crack, the rumors grew. Some argue this was calculated. Doria understood that denying too much, too loudly, would only amplify the rumors. Others say it was fear that speaking might drag the truth out into the open. Still others suggest it was fatigue. After all, Doria has lived decades with Meghan's narrative shadowing her own life. Maybe she simply couldn't summon the energy to fight. But here's the twist. Silence doesn't erase suspicion. It fuels it. The less Doria spoke, the more people wondered what she was hiding. And when she finally broke her silence, even slightly, it carried the weight of all those years of restraint. Imagine holding back a truth for decades. Imagine watching your daughter rise to fame, fall into controversy, marry into one of the most powerful families in the world, while you're carrying a secret that could unravel it all. Imagine the pressure, the sleepless nights, the careful choreography of every public appearance. A smile here, a nod there, but never a word. And then ask yourself, how long can a human being carry that weight before something slips? That's what makes Doria's recent words so haunting. She didn't scream it. She didn't blurt it. She simply hinted, suggested, left the possibility hanging. And that suggestion, small though it may have been, was more explosive than any tabloid headline. Because for the first time, the silence cracked. Let's look closer at the way Doria has always presented herself. Her body language has been studied endlessly, at the wedding, at the christening of Archie, at rare public events. Observers noted her calm, but also her guardedness. She seemed present, but not open. Supportive, but not celebratory. As if there was always something unspoken hovering between her and the cameras. And in hindsight, those moments take on new meaning. Was the guardedness simply shyness? Or was it the tension of someone holding back a story that could devastate everything? Meghan's father, Thomas, chose the opposite route. He aired grievances, sold photos, demanded attention. Doria's silence became a direct contrast, a moral high ground. But what if the high ground wasn't about virtue? What if it was about control? The fewer words she spoke, the fewer opportunities for the truth to slip out. Because here's the chilling reality. Silence is often less about loyalty to someone else and more about survival for oneself. If the rumors of a hidden child were true, or even partly true, then Doria's silence wasn't just protecting Meghan. It was protecting herself. As Meghan's mother, she would have been involved in the decisions. She would have known the truth. She would have helped manage it. And that makes her not just a witness, but a participant. So, when she finally opened her mouth, however carefully, however subtly, the world didn't hear a slip. They heard a confession. But let's not underestimate the significance of timing. Doria chose this moment, this fragile, volatile moment in Meghan and Harry's story, to speak. Why now? Was it the constant strain of media pressure? Was it fear that someone else might break the story first? Or was it, perhaps, a deliberate move to take control of the narrative before it consumed them both? Remember this. In the world of celebrity and royalty, timing is everything. One word spoken too soon can destroy. One word spoken too late can look like betrayal. But one word spoken at the exact right moment can change the entire story. And Doria, silent for decades, finally decided this was the moment. And here's where the irony stings. Doria was always seen as Meghan's anchor, the quiet force of stability. The one person Meghan could trust implicitly. But with her recent words, Doria has shifted from anchor to storm. She has become the source of the greatest uncertainty in Meghan's life. Because if your own mother suggests the rumors aren't false, how do you fight back? How do you deny something your mother just hinted at? The silence is over. The whispers are louder than ever. And the one person who could have crushed them has instead breathed new life into them. Now imagine Meghan hearing her mother's words. Imagine the panic, the fury, the betrayal. Imagine the frantic calls, the questions, the desperate attempt to control the damage. Because when a story comes from your mother, it can't be dismissed as tabloid trash. It can't be brushed off as gossip. It cuts too close. And this, dear listener, is the pivot point. For years, Doria's silence was a shield. Now, her words are a sword that has pierced Meghan's carefully constructed armor. But here's the cliffhanger. If Doria has finally spoken, even in whispers, then what comes next? What other truths has she been carrying? What else has she held back? And if one secret can slip, what's stopping the rest from tumbling out? Because the silence is broken now. And once the first crack appears, the flood cannot be stopped. What happens when whispers escape private circles and land in the jaws of the press? They stop being whispers. They become headlines. They become fuel. And once the tabloids sink their teeth into a story, they do not let go. They magnify. They distort. They feed on controversy the way vultures feed on carcasses. And Meghan Markle's story, already loaded with contradictions, gaps, and speculation, was irresistible. Ask yourself this. Why do the tabloids thrive on rumors like Meghan's supposed hidden child? Because scandal sells. Outrage sells. Mystery sells. Readers don't want neat, clean narratives. They want the messy, the shocking, the forbidden. And when you add royalty into the mix, bloodlines, titles, inheritances, the stakes rise even higher. For the British press, it was a golden opportunity. A California actress turned duchess, already accused of breaking royal tradition, now rumored to be hiding a child from her past. That wasn't just gossip. That was dynamite. Let's rewind to when Meghan first entered the royal spotlight. In 2016, when her relationship with Prince Harry went public, the press immediately launched an excavation of her past. Every friend, every ex, every coworker became a potential source. Reporters knocked on doors, bribed acquaintances, and sifted through university records. They weren't just looking for stories, they were looking for cracks. And they found them. Those gaps in Meghan's timeline that we've already explored became fertile ground for speculation. The tabloids didn't invent the hidden child rumor, but they amplified it. What began as faint whispers in Hollywood circles suddenly became international fodder. Articles appeared with suggestive headlines. The mystery of Meghan's missing years, what she doesn't want you to know, the child question nobody dares ask. Notice the phrasing. They never outright stated, but they insinuated. Because insinuation is more powerful than accusation. It lets the audience connect the dots themselves. And here's the trick. Once an audience starts connecting dots, they rarely stop. The human brain craves patterns. We look for meaning even where none exists. That's why conspiracy theories thrive. And that's why Meghan's story became such a fertile ground for endless speculation. But the tabloids didn't stop there. They dug deeper. They printed interviews with supposed ex-lovers. They quoted friends of friends who recalled suspicious silences, strange disappearances, odd behavior. They reprinted old photos, zoomed in, cropped, and captioned them with loaded suggestions. A slightly tired expression became stress from secrets. A trip abroad became an unexplained absence. A close friendship with a child became maternal attachment. The machinery of suggestion turned coincidence into conspiracy. And all the while, Meghan fought back. Lawsuits against publishers, complaints to regulators, public statements about the damage being done. But here's the cruel irony. The more she fought, the more the tabloids doubled down. Why? Because resistance makes for better copy. A denial is less interesting than a lawsuit. A statement is less gripping than a visible meltdown. The tabloids thrive on reaction, and Meghan's pushback gave them exactly what they wanted. But let's focus on the role of silence again. Doria Ragland didn't speak, and that absence of denial became its own kind of headline. Tabloids would write entire pieces dissecting her silence. Why won't Meghan's mother speak? The woman who knows the truth. What Doria could reveal. By saying nothing, she became the centerpiece of everything. The more she remained quiet, the more the tabloids framed her as holding the key, and the public bought it. This is the brilliance and cruelty of the tabloid machine. It doesn't need truth. It only needs a gap, a silence, a pause, a refusal. Because in that gap, it plants its own narrative. And once planted, it grows like weeds. Now think about how this rumor affected not just Meghan, but the monarchy itself. The British press has a long history of feeding on royal scandal. Princess Diana's affairs, Prince Andrew's connections, Fergie's financial troubles. The institution has always been fair game. But Meghan's supposed hidden child struck at something deeper, the purity of lineage. If true, it meant Meghan carried a secret past into the royal family. It raised questions about honesty, trust, and legitimacy. And for a monarchy obsessed with appearances, that was poison. Of course, no hard proof ever surfaced. But proof was never the goal. For tabloids, the goal is obsession. They wanted the public hooked, questioning, suspicious. They wanted endless clicks, endless debate. And Meghan, with her American background, mixed race identity, and outsider status, was an easy target. The machine didn't just run, it roared. Here's the paradox. Meghan wanted control. She wanted to tell her story on her own terms. But the more she tried to wrestle control from the press, the more they twisted it against her. Every carefully crafted interview became fodder. Every Netflix documentary became evidence. Every Oprah confession became twisted into contradiction. And beneath it all, the hidden child rumors simmered, refusing to die. And then came Doria's words. A tiny crack in decades of silence. A suggestion, not even a confession. But for the tabloids, it was Christmas morning. Suddenly, every old headline could be recycled. Every insinuation could be revisited. Every whisper could be replayed under the banner of confirmation. And if Meghan thought the storm had peaked years earlier, she was wrong. It was only just beginning. But let's step back. Why do we, the audience, consume this so ravenously? Because scandal is theater. It's Shakespeare for the modern age. Betrayal, secrecy, power, downfall. It's all there. And Meghan's story, whether true or false, has all the elements of a tragic play. The ambitious heroine, the loyal mother, the looming crown, the whispers of a secret that could bring it all crashing down. And here's the most dangerous part. Once the tabloids latch onto a story, it becomes self-fulfilling. Even if evidence never appears, the sheer repetition creates belief. People start saying, well, where there's smoke, there must be fire. And that phrase, so seductive, so logical, ignores the reality that sometimes smoke is manufactured. Sometimes it's just fog pumped into the room by the very machine designed to make you believe. But Meghan's story is different, because now, the smoke isn't just coming from tabloids. It's coming from her own mother. And when the machine has both rumor and family hinting in the same direction, the result is explosive. So ask yourself this. If the tabloids were already powerful enough to hound Meghan into retreat, what happens when Doria's words pour gasoline onto their fire? What happens when the machine has a new weapon, Meghan's own bloodline feeding the narrative? Because the tabloid machine doesn't care about truth. It cares about momentum. And with Doria's whisper, that momentum is unstoppable. And the next step isn't just about gossip columns or clickbait headlines. It's about something far more personal. A mother's burden, a daughter's fear, a secret carried for decades. Which leads us directly into the heart of the storm. The emotional weight of Doria's silence, the cost of loyalty, and the crushing reality of what she may have been hiding all along. And what comes next isn't just rumor. It's confession. What secret would you carry for your child? How far would you go to protect them? Even if it meant silencing your own truth. Even if it meant watching the world speculate and accuse while you stood in the shadows. This is the burden that Doria Ragland has carried for decades. A mother's burden is unlike any other. It's heavy, it's personal, and it doesn't end when the child grows up. And in Doria's case, that burden may very well be the key to understanding why the whispers of Meghan Markle's hidden child have never gone away. Imagine the early years. Meghan, ambitious and restless, chasing dreams bigger than the world she was born into. Doria, watching her daughter navigate life in Los Angeles, a city where secrets are currency and gossip is oxygen. She would have seen Meghan stumble, fall, and rise again. She would have been there in moments of triumph and moments of despair. And if there was a secret, if there truly was a chapter in Meghan's past that could shatter her carefully polished image, then Doria would have been the first to know. Here's the question, what does a mother do with knowledge like that? Does she hide it? Deny it? Or does she carry it quietly, like a locked box that only she has the key to? The psychology of mothers who keep secrets for their children is chillingly complex. On the one hand, there is love, fierce, protective, uncompromising love. The instinct to shield your child from harm is primal. But on the other hand, there is fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of consequences. Fear that the secret, once revealed, will not only damage the child but destroy the entire family. And so, mothers bury it. They build walls of silence. They convince themselves that silence is safety. But silence has a cost. It corrodes. It eats away from the inside. For years, Doria's silence was seen as strength. People admired her for staying above the chaos while Meghan's father courted the press. She became the model of restraint. But what if that restraint wasn't dignity at all? What if it was exhaustion? What if it was the weight of carrying something so heavy that even words would have cracked her open? Think about the public moments when Doria appeared by Meghan's side. At the royal wedding, sitting alone among strangers while the world watched. At Archie's christening, smiling faintly for the cameras. At public charity events, nodding politely but never saying much. Look closely, and you can see it, the weariness in her eyes. The look of someone present in body but carrying something elsewhere in her mind. Supportive, yes, but also distant. Why distant? Because when you're carrying a burden that big, joy becomes complicated. Every smile risks slipping into a crack. Every laugh risks betraying the truth. A mother who knows something she cannot say learns to guard her face, her tone, her every gesture. And that is exactly what people noticed about Doria, guardedness. Let's explore the what if. What if Meghan, in her 20s, faced a moment of crisis? A pregnancy, a child, a decision that had to be hidden. Who would she turn to first? Not Hollywood friends, not boyfriends, not even her father, with whom she had a complicated relationship. she would turn to her mother. Doria would be the one to guide her, to protect her, to take charge of the situation. And in doing so, Doria would become complicit in the silence. Now, complicity doesn't always mean guilt. Sometimes it means sacrifice. A mother who takes on her child's secret sacrifices her own peace of mind. She becomes the vault. She becomes the protector. And she bears the weight of every consequence that comes after. For Doria, that might have meant years of pretending, years of biting her tongue, years of allowing others to think of her as merely quiet, when in reality, she was carrying the loudest truth of all. And here's where the story turns tragic. Because Meghan didn't just become famous, she became royalty. And with royalty comes scrutiny unlike any other. Suddenly, the secret wasn't just a private family matter. It was a potential royal scandal. It was something that could shake institutions, fuel tabloids, and tarnish legacies. The burden Doria carried didn't just grow heavier. It became unbearable. Yet she still didn't speak. She watched as rumors swirled. She watched as her daughter was accused, mocked, vilified. She watched as Meghan cried out about the cruelty of the press, all while knowing that some of those rumors weren't entirely baseless. Imagine that torment. A mother forced to watch her daughter suffer, knowing that part of the suffering comes from a truth they both agreed never to share. That is the cruel irony of secrets. They are meant to protect, but they often cause more pain than revelation ever would. And then came the slip, the whisper, the words that cracked the silence. Doria, after decades of restraint, finally admitted that the rumors weren't entirely false. She didn't confirm everything. She didn't lay out details. But she acknowledged enough to change the narrative forever. And in doing so, she exposed the burden she had been carrying all along. Think about the weight of that moment. After years of silence, the first words would feel like a dam breaking. And yet, she didn't release a flood. She released a trickle, a calculated hint, enough to unburden herself slightly, but not enough to destroy everything. That balancing act is the essence of a mother's burden. Protecting while confessing, unloading while still holding back. And now the world is left to interpret. Was Doria's whisper an act of betrayal? Or was it an act of mercy? Did she finally grow tired of carrying the secret alone? Or did she believe that the truth, in fragments, was better than the crushing weight of silence? No matter the motivation, the result is the same. Meghan is left exposed. The tabloids are ravenous. And the monarchy is unsettled. All because one mother could no longer carry the burden alone. But here's the cliffhanger that haunts everything. If Doria has admitted that the rumors aren't entirely false, what else does she know? What details has she kept back? What truths remain locked away in her silence? Because one thing is certain, the burden she carried for so long is not fully unburdened. And when the rest of that truth comes out, it won't just shake Meghan's world. It will shake the monarchy itself. Every mystery hinges on the moments no one can explain. The missing hours, the unaccounted days, the chapters in a life that don't quite fit the story being told. And when it comes to Meghan Markle, those timeline gaps are what fuel the whispers of a hidden child more than anything else. Let's be clear, Meghan has always presented her journey as smooth, almost cinematic. Childhood in Los Angeles, bright student at Immaculate Heart High School, Northwestern graduate in theater and international relations, struggling actress in Hollywood, breakthrough on Suits, marriage to a prince. It reads like a well-edited script. But here's the problem. Life is never that clean. Real life is messy, unpredictable, filled with setbacks and detours. And Meghan's public story skips over those detours with almost suspicious neatness. So what's missing? Start with her years at Northwestern. Meghan graduates in 2003. She talks about internships, acting gigs, and studying abroad in Madrid and Argentina. But some classmates recall something odd, gaps in her presence. Times when she was suddenly gone without explanation, then reappeared polished and composed. When asked, Meghan would offer vague answers. I was traveling. I was busy with family. I had a lot going on. Perfectly plausible. But the lack of detail always left people wondering. Then come the Hollywood years, between 2004 and 2010. These are the years when Meghan should have been everywhere. Auditioning, networking, showing up at parties, fighting for her big break. And yes, she did appear in small roles in commercials. But there are long stretches where her activities are oddly undocumented. Months at a time without clear projects. Photos from certain years are scarce. And in a city where aspiring actors document everything, Meghan's selective absence sticks out. It's in these absences that the whispers of a hidden pregnancy, and possibly a hidden child, take root. Think about it. Rumors don't survive without fertile ground. A single whisper of "she disappeared for a while" isn't enough. But when multiple people notice the same thing, when gaps line up with changes in demeanor, when the official story skips over those periods, the rumors grow legs. And Meghan's timeline gaps gave the whispers room to run. Consider this. Between 2006 and 2007, Meghan's professional record thins dramatically. Some explain it as the grind of Hollywood. Actors often go months without work. True, but during that same window, Meghan's close friends describe her as more private than ever. She avoided parties. She limited social circles. She kept conversations vague. And then, as suddenly as she withdrew, she returned, sharper and hungrier. What happened in those months? Some say nothing, that it was simply burnout, a period of recalibration. But others point to it as the most likely window for the rumored child. Now let's move forward to 2010. Meghan lands her breakthrough role as Rachel Zane on Suits. Her image solidifies. Her career accelerates. And suddenly, those earlier gaps become harder to question because she's now under the spotlight. The public narrative begins here. Meghan Markle, successful actress, philanthropist, and later duchess. Everything before becomes background noise, except the tabloids never let it go. They kept circling those missing years, those unexplained silences, looking for evidence. And here's where the story gets even more compelling. When Meghan and Harry married in 2018, the British press conducted one of the most aggressive background investigations ever unleashed on a royal bride. They looked into school records, ex-boyfriends, financial history. And what surfaced? Again, those same timeline gaps, those same unexplained absences. And while the palace tried to brush it off, the tabloids did what tabloids do best. They filled in the blanks with speculation. One paper even published a side-by-side comparison of Meghan's known timeline versus the whispered timeline, pointing out missing months, conflicting accounts, and overlapping stories. The headline was brutal. The missing years Meghan won't explain. The implication was clear. Something had happened, something she didn't want the world to know. Let's pause here and ask, why are gaps so dangerous? Because the human mind hates uncertainty. When details are missing, we fill them in ourselves. We imagine, we speculate, we invent, and the invention often sticks harder than the truth. Meghan's timeline gaps became a canvas onto which the world painted its own suspicions. But here's the part that matters most. If the rumor of a hidden child is true, those gaps would be the smoking gun. A pregnancy and birth can't be hidden in plain sight. They require disappearance, retreat, privacy. And Meghan's pattern of pulling away, of vanishing and re-emerging, fits that suspicion perfectly. Too perfectly. Of course, Meghan and her defenders argue otherwise. They say she was simply grinding in Hollywood, that the life of a struggling actress is naturally inconsistent. And yes, that's plausible. But then why not lay it all out? Why not provide receipts, explanations, a clear account? Why leave those periods so vague? The absence of clarity becomes its own form of evidence. And then there's Doria. Remember, Meghan's mother was present during all those years. She knows where Meghan was, what she was doing, why she disappeared. She could close the timeline gaps with a single statement. But she didn't. She stayed silent. And when she finally broke her silence, she didn't erase the speculation. She confirmed that the whispers weren't entirely false. Which means those gaps now feel even more ominous. Because if the mother who lived through those missing chapters admits the rumors aren't baseless, then what are we supposed to believe? The timeline gaps are no longer coincidences. They're clues. And the whispers of the hidden child no longer sound like baseless gossip. They sound like a puzzle waiting to be solved. And here's where the cliffhanger sharpens. Every missing year, every unexplained month, every evasive answer adds up to one unavoidable question. What exactly happened during those gaps? Because the truth buried in those missing chapters isn't just about Meghan's past. It's about her present. And if the timeline is ever filled in completely, the story could shatter the image she has fought so hard to protect. And the next piece of the puzzle isn't about dates or timelines at all. It's about people. The ex-lovers, the confidants, The ones who claim to have been there when it mattered most. The ones who say they know what Meghan was hiding. What if the truth isn't buried in documents, timelines, or official records, but in the mouths of the people who knew Meghan most intimately? Lovers, exes, the people who were close enough to see past the public mask. If anyone could confirm or deny the whispers of a hidden child, it would be them. And over the years, a handful of voices have emerged. Some credible, some questionable, but all carrying fragments of a story that the world desperately wants to piece together. So let's ask the obvious. Who were Meghan's men before Prince Harry? The official narrative is sparse. Meghan herself rarely discusses past relationships, and the story she and her PR team present is neat. She married film producer Trevor Engelson in 2011, divorced in 2013, dated chef Corey Vitiello afterward, and then met Harry in 2016. Simple, streamlined, respectable. But real life, as we know, is never that simple. Throughout her 20s, Meghan was linked to a series of men, actors, businessmen, athletes. Some were brief flings, others more serious. But what unites many of these stories is how inconsistently they are told. Friends recall names that never appear in Meghan's official biography. Tabloids claim relationships that Meghan never acknowledges. And somewhere in this messy mix, a few ex-lovers have suggested something that aligns disturbingly well with the hidden child rumor. Take one anonymous account published in a little-known Hollywood gossip blog in 2009. The source claimed to be a man who had dated Meghan briefly in the mid-2000s. According to him, Meghan was warm, ambitious, but guarded. He described how she would open up about her dreams, her struggles, even her frustrations with Hollywood, but never about her family or her past. It was like there was a wall, he said. I always felt like there was something she wasn't telling me. At the time, readers dismissed it as bitterness from an ex. But in light of Doria's recent words, that something takes on new meaning. Then there's the case of a Canadian businessman Meghan was rumored to have dated around 2006. He never went on record, but friends in his circle claimed he confided about Meghan's unexpected situation. The details were vague, deliberately so, but the phrasing raised eyebrows. What unexpected situation could derail a relationship so quickly? And then, of course, we have Trevor Engelson, Meghan's first husband, the man who knew her better than anyone during her rise to fame. Officially, Trevor has remained quiet. He has never publicly accused Meghan of hiding a child, nor has he ever confirmed the rumors. But silence, as we've seen, can be just as telling as words. When asked in interviews about Meghan, Trevor avoids personal details entirely. He sidesteps questions. He speaks in generalities. It's as if he has drawn a line, one he refuses to cross. Why? Is it respect? Or is it something more complicated? One insider from Trevor's production circle claimed that Meghan's past was a source of tension in their marriage. According to this source, Trevor often felt like he didn't know the full story. She was secretive, the insider said. There were parts of her life she never let him touch. It was like she had compartments. Trevor was in one, and the rest was locked away. Now pause here. Doesn't that sound eerily familiar? The same pattern emerges again and again. Guardedness, compartmentalization, silence about the past. If it were just one ex saying this, we could dismiss it as bitterness. But when multiple people describe the same behavior, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. And then we get to the most explosive allegation of all. In 2017, just before Meghan's engagement to Harry, a man claiming to be one of her old lovers gave an interview to a tabloid. He alleged that Meghan had confided in him about a life-changing decision she made years earlier. He didn't provide details. He didn't say the word child, but his description was haunting. She told me it was something she'd carry with her forever, he said. She said it changed how she looked at the world. But she also said no one could ever know. Was he embellishing? Possibly. Was he paid? Almost certainly. But again, the language mirrors the whispers that have surrounded Meghan for years. Something she'd carry forever. Something no one could ever know. If not a child, then what? Of course, Meghan has fiercely denied, or more accurately, ignored, these kinds of stories. She rarely addresses exes, and when she does, it's to frame herself as having learned lessons or grown stronger. She never names names, never goes into detail, which is smart PR, but it also leaves room for others to tell their versions. And in that vacuum, rumors thrive. Let's also consider the cultural dynamics. Hollywood is brutal when it comes to secrets. Ex-lovers, friends, colleagues, anyone can sell a story to the tabloids. Yet strangely, despite Meghan's rising fame, relatively few of her exes have spoken out in detail. Why? Could it be that there's nothing to tell? Or could it be that there is something, and they've been silenced, legally, financially, or otherwise? Non-disclosure agreements are common in Hollywood relationships, especially when one partner fears reputation damage. Did Meghan secure her silence that way? It's a question that hangs in the air. And then we circle back, inevitably, to Doria. Because at the end of the day, ex-lovers can speculate, acquaintances can suggest, tabloids can exaggerate. But only Doria lived through every chapter. She knows which exes matter, which rumors are false, and which whispers are true. And by hinting that the hidden child rumors weren't entirely baseless, she has inadvertently validated every ex-lover allegation that aligns with that theory. Suddenly, the voices of those exes, once dismissed as opportunistic, sound chillingly plausible.